Hello, Importer Corner family. We are back for our second recording, and hopefully those who weren't able to join us for the first summer edition, you received the email with the recording for the first one. And if you're not able to join us today, then we will do the same. And we are happy to take suggestions on because this is for everyone, and so we want to make sure that we are meeting your needs. So Alyssa, it is great to see you on this kind of steamy but not so much DC summer day.
Not nearly as bad as it's been. And just to second what Leslie said, yes, moving forward, we love feedback on the format for videos or tastings. We can do videos that we pre-record and send out with your boxes. You just have a little QR code, or I'll leave Leslie and smarter people to that kind of technology. We can do something like that, or we can do bi-weekly videos like we've done this time, just kind of see what fits with everyone's schedule, which is always hard to predict. But I am excited to talk about the two wines that we have tonight. I only have one of them with me. Leslie, do you have either one? Let's see which one. Okay, we have the same one. That's okay. So
But
it's
so good. It's so good.
It's so good. And I would love to drink our first wine tonight because, as you said, it is warm out, and I believe the Chenin's a really nice wine with the warmer weather. But I had opened the bottle yesterday for an Instagram post that I was making. So I was like, well, I shouldn't open two bottles of wine. We should just stick with the one. So tonight we are featuring Villiera's Chenin Blanc from Villiera Wine Estate in Stellenbosch, and our Bottelary Hills Red from Kaapzicht Wine Estate, also in Stellenbosch. I don't know why my vocabulary, I'm struggling with pronunciations of words I'm quite comfortable saying. At least it's in Afrikaans. So, little behind the scenes on how I came to work with these wineries. Kaapzicht, we had reached out to directly. Wines of South Africa suggested I reach out to them. They had broke ties with their past US importer and were looking for someone else. So we went down to South Africa, we met with them, started bringing in their wines. Now, we were at their house having a lovely braai or South African barbecue. And we started actually talking about sparkling wine, which we're not going into tonight because, Leslie, you always carry the Villiera sparkling wines. But we started talking about sparkling wine and how we wanted to taste some and who do you recommend? And immediately the Stettler family from Kaapzicht recommended that we go see Villiera. The next morning, so we stayed and we drank a lot of wine. We ate quite a bit of meat, had a lovely braai. And the next morning I wasn't feeling my most, jubilant self. So we decided to go to Villiera anyway. And the first sip I took of their sparkling wine, I was blown away. I said that I don't know why that photo's not there. It was a really cool picture of a Springbok. I wonder if it's the format. Anyway, I said, wow, we've got to work with these folks. I'll explain in a moment why these are all animal photos. It does make sense. I said, I have to work with these folks. I emailed the export manager, Kathy. She got back to me right away and said, we've actually met before. We met at a trade tasting in New York. I remember that you're a physical therapist. Your husband works on Capitol Hill, but at that time you weren't interested in sparkling wines. We didn't really connect. Sure enough, a few years later, we were ready to bring in sparklings, and we started with their bubbles, but have since expanded our portfolio. Everything I've tasted from Villiera wines has been fantastic. I brought their Chenin in. It was a little bit of a risk for me because I carry another Chenin from Kaapzicht. So this was going to be two of the same varietal, two single varietal Chenin Blancs from South Africa for a tiny importer. But when I tasted it, I realized that this wine was so incredibly different than the Kaapzicht Chenin. Villiera's Chenin, about half of the juice is fermented in barrels. So when you taste it, you'll get like little notes of spice. It has a little bit of a fuller body, a slight richness to it, but still that really clean, crisp Chenin finish. Leslie, have you tried it? You've tried it in the past, right?
I I have not.
Okay.
Because I'm sitting here going, I would remember that. And
Yeah.
I have
It's
not. And interesting, let me ask you this question. Do they keep the Chenin on the skins for a little? Is there a little maturation before?
yes, about 6 hours. Yeah, so that will add a little bit of that mouth feel, a little
Yes.
bit of that
Mm-hmm.
complexity too.
Mm-hmm.
Villiera, also their standard practice is to harvest at different times during the harvest period. So they might do one round where they pick grapes that are slightly underripe, next round where they're at like peak ripeness to really preserve the fruit flavors. And then lastly, they might even leave some clusters hanging to go for some that are a little bit overripe, little bit higher, which will then turn into adding a little bit more body, adding a little bit more sugar, which will then turn into alcohol in the wine. So you end up getting a very complex wine, even though it's still clean, crisp, and easy drinking.
Because I hate to say this, admit this out loud. I would have grabbed that one from our warehouse instead. But I was thinking, and see, I just like you were thinking, why should we carry two Chenin Blancs, right? And so I'm like, I have plenty of Chenin Blanc. I know South African Chenin Blanc, what have you. It's Chenin Blanc. Let me try this one. But now that like you described it so beautifully, now I want to go back and open up a bottle of it because I bet it has probably a little more roundness to the
Mm-hmm.
flavor and a really nice mouthfeel that could be a little confusing if you didn't know it was a Chenin Blanc.
It's when I describe most people I interact with have not had much Chenin Blanc, unless
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're like really into French wine and they've drank a lot of wine from the Loire. Most people haven't had Chenin, don't know what it is, and certainly haven't had South African Chenin.
Right.
I tell people that Chenin Blanc kind of falls in between like Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. It's not as aggressively zippy as a Sauvignon Blanc, but it's not as rich and heavy as many Chardonnays are made in the market. It falls right in between. It's also just a very versatile grape. It's got high acidity. That's always going to be consistent, but it's a grape that you can make and do it in all stainless steel. That's what
Mm-hmm.
Kaapzicht does. Or you can do it in all oak. You can ferment it in oak and age it in oak. Many wineries do that. You can make sparkling wine with it. You can actually even make sweet wine with it as well. So it's super, super versatile. It meets a lot of needs. Like if you've got a friend who's like, I only drink Pinot Grigio, and another friend who only drinks
Yeah.
Chardonnay, it falls right in the middle. It'll usually make both people pretty happy.
I think when I first seriously entered the industry, I was only familiar with Chenin Blanc and Bourret specifically, right? So I had this um, misperception that many Chenins were off dry, right? Or super high in acid because that's what you get in
Mhm.
that French region. So when I had one from South Africa, I was like, holy smokes, Batman, I really love this because
Yeah.
you're right. It's that middle of the body. I'm not always a big Sauvignon Blanc person. I'm doing better. And I don't always want a big buttery Chardonnay, and I don't necessarily also want a Chablis either that's really high in acid. This is like a really good middle of the road, especially to if you're serving white wine at an event and you don't want those two extremes and you don't want to go with the white blend, you're looking for a single varietal. South African Chenin Blanc, I think, is the answer because it is that perfect middle of the road without going for a blend. And it's very tasty. And I always get people like look at the glass and they go, what is this again?
That's
So
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you said that because my friends, Ali and Dan, who are part of this club and might watch this later, used one of my Chenins at their wedding. It was fantastic. It was so much fun. I think Ian and I probably drank the majority of it, but it was such a great white wine option to make lots of people
Mm-hmm.
happy. And
Yes.
many
Yeah.
people don't know that South Africa actually grows the most Chenin Blanc in the world. I want to explain why I have a bunch of animal pictures because that might seem
Okay.
random when we're talking about a winery. But Villiera is going above and beyond as far as their sustainability efforts in wine growing. Most South African, not most, all South African producers that come into the US will have this little sustainability certification on the bottle. But Villiera is going beyond just kind of the, I don't want to say bare minimum, but the practices to meet the certification. This is part of their wildlife refuge. They've teamed up with neighboring farmers, recognizing that wine grapes and agriculture are not native to South Africa. And they've set aside part of their respective properties and made it an official game reserve. So no planting other stuff, no agriculture, certainly no hunting, but you can go through and do a photo safari. So this is some of the animals that they have at the preserve. They have zebra, they have springbok, which are a type of antelope, giraffes, lots of birds, tortoises. It's really cool that they've chosen to put that effort in. And then in addition to that, so this is the winemaker. This is Nathan Valentine, our winemaker at Villiera Wines. I believe he's been there, it's been a little while now. I want to say 2016 or 2014. He initially was had a co-winemaker who has since chosen to go into a different career. So he is now the head winemaker and completely in charge. He's actually pouring Villiera's barrel fermented Chenin. Barrel fermented barrel aged Chenin, which I don't currently carry. That's what is in his hand, but he's definitely somebody who loves his Chenin, loves to represent South African Chenin. I believe in the next slide, you get to see, so this is a baby giraffe that was born in November on the property. And then you can see in the other photo, there's the solar panels. So Villiera uses solar power for their electricity. They recycle water, which is important. They're not using water necessarily to irrigate the vines or do anything like that, but you need a lot of water to make wine to clean the cellar. So by recycling water, they're minimizing how much they're draining the reservoirs in South Africa. You'll also notice different trees and bushes on the property. Again, recognizing that vines are not native plants. They will replant native flora in different parts of the vineyard to make sure that there is good biodiversity in the vineyard. So it's a very, very unique winery to visit because you can do a tasting and then you can go do a little mini safari.
That's really cool. I
Yeah,
recently learned that giraffes don't have vocal cords.
I don't know.
And so they don't really make a sound. I mean, they still communicate. It's like a really high pitched sound that only they can hear, but they don't have vocal cords, which kind of makes
Well,
sense if the long neck,
it would be hard to project all
Right,
that way
exactly.
up. Yeah, yeah. Huh, that's a
Yes,
little
yes.
fun
And
fact.
yeah. And anytime you want to know a useless fun fact that they probably wouldn't even carry on Jeopardy, just ask me because I'm full of them.
You're our woman. I love it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So for anyone who visits South Africa, this is a winery I would highly recommend visiting. One of my sales reps from Georgia is flying to South Africa next week, and she's going to visit the folks at Villiera on Saturday, the 6th. So she'll get to do her little
Okay.
wine tasting and safari.
I'll have to keep that in mind because we're going in
You're
January.
going in January. That's right.
So I will definitely, and um, I'm not trying to tell you what to include in the club, but if you included their sparkling, I think it would be a really nice bonus add.
That that could be a nice Q3 wine. Yeah.
They're they're I love the rosé. Yeah, I really love the rosé, but I enjoy the brut too.
Yeah.
I was recommending it to somebody today.
Or maybe around the holidays, that could be a nice time to pull
That
that out.
that could be
Yeah.
very nice. Yes.
Yeah, so that's Villiera. And again, the folks at Kaapzicht were the people who not introduced me, but suggested that I should go and check them out. And I've been working with Villiera since 2018. They've been a fantastic partner. I've actually never visited the winery as one of their importers. Was there just as a tourist and then made that connection. But I will be going to visit as me in, I was going to say in 2020. That's not true. The plan was to go in 2020. I will be going in August. So I will actually get to spend a little bit more time at the property and maybe see the game reserve for the first time.
Sounds like fun.
All right.
Yeah.
So now we can head just about 15 minutes. I think they're east. I might be flipping that around in my brain, but we can head about 15 minutes away from Villiera. It's a Kaapzicht wine estate, also in Stellenbosch. Different region, a little bit higher elevation. You can see in the photo that's Table Mountain. So we would have to be a bit higher up in order to see Table Mountain from Stellenbosch. If you were down in the valleys, you wouldn't be able to view the mountain from there. Kaapzicht, which is not the right pronunciation, but I'm not going to try German, is German for Cape View. So the idea is that they have the view of the Cape, the view of Table Mountain, the view of False Bay from the higher points in their vineyards. The next photo is actually really nice. It shows how well cell phone technology has changed, because I believe that first photo is a professional photo from like 10 years ago. This is a picture, former owner. I mean, she's still owner. The parents retired. This Ingfield Stetler just like took this with her phone one night, having a drink up in the vineyard. So you can
Wow.
really see the camera technology improving between the two photos. But yeah, so this is just another view from up in their vineyards. They'll take the tractor up there and have a sundowner, a nice glass of something light like the Chenin, something easy to drink. But that is not what we're tasting today. Today we are tasting the Bottelary Hills Red, which I think is one of the best reds you can get for the price point. There are notes of this that remind me of a Napa Cabernet. If this was a Napa Cabernet, it would easily cost $50, $60, if not more on the shelf. But being from South Africa, they don't have that like marketable reputation. So it retails at a much, much lower price point, because obviously if this was a $60 bottle of wine, it wouldn't work in our Importers Corner Club. So I'll talk about what's in the blend, but the grapes themselves to me are not as important. It's the idea that the winemaking team was trying to really capture the essence of where they come from. So it's not that Danny and Kaylee were like, oh, we want to make a blend with Merlot and Cabernet and Shiraz. It was, they wanted to just have something that truly captured the place where their grapes are, which is Bottelary Hills, Stellenbosch. And that is what this wine is about. For me, it's also a little bit like the big brother to one of the wines that we did back in the first Importers Corner Club, the Kaapzicht Kaleidoscope Red, which is a bit lighter bodied. It's a wine that you could actually chill in the warmer weather. The Kaleidoscope, Danny actually came up with because he likes to braai or do that South African barbecue, and he likes to have a glass of wine while he does it. And maybe when you're standing right next to the fire, you don't want to have something warm in your glass. So, and he's a red wine guy, or beer. So he wanted a red wine that he could stick in the cooler, chill down, enjoy on a hot day, enjoy while he is standing next to the fire. But he is quite a cook. And the recipe that I provided with this, while it wasn't a barbecue recipe, I believe it was like a braised beef or a braised lamb. I wanted to use his recipe because he really enjoys cooking. It's another one of his passions. So I thought, why not share something from him rather than something I find on the internet? But this is a wine meant to have with dinner. So you're standing around next to the grill, you're chit-chatting with your buddies, you have a glass of Kaleidoscope. food's ready, you go sit down, and then that's when you bring out the big boy. So that's the kind of the vibe or the feeling behind the Bottelary Hills Red. And it is a blend. Bottelary is an appropriate name. Bottelary is the pantry on a ship. So they named this region Bottelary Hills because it used to be a trading post. So it's about a 2-day walk from Cape Town, and it was a trading stop during the day. So this is kind of the idea. It's a blend. We're going to use different things just to showcase where we are. This particular vintage, and it will change a bit year to year, is kind of like the Rhone, the Rhone Valley meets Bordeaux. That's the easiest way to remember the grape varietals. So we have Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. 5 Rhone varietals. Goodness, 5 Bordeaux varietals. But 17% of the blend is Shiraz, which is in France, predominantly found in the Rhone region. So we kind of have a little bit of Bordeaux meets the Rhone. Now you have tasted this because I saw you do it a second ago. I love the nose on this. I think it's really pretty. Mine's been open for about an hour now. I get really nice, like black fruit, but some red fruit too, maybe red currant or strawberry preserves, some plums, some baking spice. And then this note that reminds me more of like dried fruit, like almost like a dried blackberry or blueberry. And it sounds ridiculous, but a little bit of leather too comes off. Right?
I always say this wrong, and please correct me. But when I first tasted it, it tasted like what is it? Touriga Nacional, the Portuguese
Uh-huh.
wine.
That's a really good poll. So one of my notes on the palate are actually, I do get some floral aromas and flavors on the wine too. And with Touriga, it's the traditional note is violet. So that's an
Mhm.
aroma and flavor that is associated with Touriga Nacional. Now picture the Douro Valley. You have high elevation, you have a warm, sunny climate, and you have a little bit of a water influence from the Douro. Now here we are in South Africa. We're not quite as high elevation, but we are up in the hills. Again, you can see Table Mountain in the background. So we're
Right.
up there a bit. We have that water influence. And because we're at a higher elevation, we get a cooler nighttime temperature. What that essentially does, the grapes, they'll ripen more quickly during the day, but then that drop in temp, that
Yes.
ripening slows down at night, and that specifically preserves floral aromas in. I think that's a really good poll.
That and it also, it always leaves there's always a long finish. Like I'm still tasting it. And like you said, it does have that jammy, like that mixed compo jammy flavor on like the finish, the back finish of it, which I really like that. And even though this is a big boy, I could drink it over the summer. Like it's not super tannic, but that you are getting some smoke there. You are getting a little tar and leather in there, but it's palatable. Like you want to have another glass. And I just opened this, and initially I was trying to Corvin it, but my Corvin like went out on me.
Oh
Which I'm not
no.
complaining. I'm not I'm not complaining because I am going to drink this. Um, so I can just imagine like an hour from now, it really opening up, and it's just so much fruit in the jar. And I always say this to people when we're doing wine tastings, that remember, these are grapes, right? It's not supposed to be all of that other stuff. And you can just taste the care that the
Mhm.
vineyard manager took, the winemaker took in making this, because they're really preserving the grape natural flavor in this wine. It is very well made. Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible how we can get so many notes of different fruits and
Mm-hmm.
different things in a wine. And I think sometimes people look down at blends because it's like, oh, what? Your cab wasn't good enough, your Shiraz wasn't good enough. And that's not necessarily it. It's like cooking. If I'm going to make a dish, I'm usually using a little salt, a little pepper, maybe paprika, whatever assortment of spices you're using. That's kind of all it is. You're like, let me showcase this the best way I can. And it
Right.
allows the winemaking team to like incorporate a little bit of art into just the science. Do they do single varietals as well? Absolutely. They have a Cabernet, they have a Cinsault, the Chenin that we talked
Mm-hmm.
about, Pinotage as one must in South Africa. But in wanting to really just show off the things that Bottelary Hills can do, it gives you a really complex wine, as you said, a long finish and a very, very well balanced wine. Yeah, it's a big guy. It has these earthy notes that you could almost say are a little bit rustic, but it's still
Mm-hmm.
elegant. It still has a
Yeah.
clean finish. It's balanced. It's a wine that, I would not, if your house gets to 89 degrees during the summer, don't store it. Don't just
Hey, right.
pop it open, stick
Right.
in the fridge for a half an hour so it can get
Mm-hmm.
down to quote unquote cellar temperature, not cold like maybe the
Yes.
kaleidoscope, but where it's, not a hot, it should not be a hot drink that you're having.
No,
Then the balance will be off. It won't work. Yeah.
no, it should not. And I think like vineyards like this, where they're they're a reasonable size vineyard. They're not like the super big boys or what have you. But I like the fact that they have a blend because each vintage is going to be different, right? Even if they
Mhm.
use the same percentages or what have you, this is going to be different than a 2026 vintage, what have you, because of that variation there and that whole blending process, because something's going to change with the grapes throughout that time period. So I
Mhm.
love a good blend. I love a good blend. I love that it can't be duplicated. When it's duplicated, it's mass produced, and I don't like that. But
Mhm.
each vintage is different.
It really showcases the place and the time.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we're lucky that they were even allowed to make this vintage because this is 2020. One point in South Africa, they did debate just
Yes.
shutting down winemaking. They weren't allowed to sell, but thankfully they did allow them to continue to harvest and do their job and allow
Mhm.
everybody to do what they needed to do, at least to get the wine produced that year. So, and I think this is a wine that I would like to hang on to a few bottles of
Mhm.
because it is still has a lot of fruit. There's great structure on this. This is something that could be cool to taste in 5 years, 8 years,
Think
maybe
so,
even
yeah.
10 years. Yeah.
Mhm.
So this is
It
the set.
definitely has not peaked.
No, this is the Stetler family. The big guy is Danny Jr. He's a former rugby player. Behind him is his father, Danny Sr. The woman with the blonde hair is Karen. And then these are their two kids and one of their puppies.
I love that everybody, his forearms are purple.
Yeah. Danny really wanted, he made some changes to the business structure. He and Karen did, from marketing and the labels to other back end things that they were doing. His goal is to be able to leave this business to his children and allow them to not have to struggle the way many small businesses do. So yeah, that's his hope, that the kiddos will eventually take over. And if not, they'll do something else and they'll have a family legacy. And then let's see, there's Danny manning the braai. So he is a guy who likes to cook meat over wood flame outside. I guarantee he's got a beer or a glass of wine nearby.
Yeah, he has a glass of wine in his hand.
Oh my gosh, does he really?
He does. He's like super skilled because he's holding the wine by the base, not the stem, and
Yeah.
he's flipping. It looks like there's like burgers or patties or something in there, and the other
Yeah, it's
hand.
probably sausage patties. Yeah, no, the
Yeah.
most I can do is like maybe if I'm stirring something, I can have a sip, but I'm definitely not out there like physically flipping a large thing while having wine. So
Yeah, no, he's
good for
serious. Yeah, he's good at his game. Yeah.
don't take his wine and don't take his meat, and he's good. Yeah, he's a good guy too. He's laid back. He came and visited us in the market in 2018, and I lived in a condo in Parkview, and he slept on a futon and was perfectly fine with that.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah. So
That's
yeah, very low key person. Yeah.
Well, I have to say I haven't tried the Chenin Blanc, but I'm not going to be disappointed. But I thoroughly enjoyed the wines from this allocation.
I think this was a good group, and I am excited because I had some brand new wine land about a week ago, which I will talk to Leslie about before I mention. But we do have a new producer that we're working with, which could be really fun to share with the Importers Corner Club. Because again, just like with our last red from Quinta da Devesa, the Red Reserva, y'all would be some of the first to get to try the wines. So that could be really fun.
We may want to consider because we've done all four like in this month, right? Where it's come
Mhm.
out. And the next quarter is September, right? So maybe
Mhm.
what we might want to consider is maybe in July or like the end of August or something, maybe doing a food pairing with the wines,
Okay.
since these are
Yeah.
definitely food wines, that we can talk about the wines.
I love it. That sounds good. All right. Well, thank you for those who made it. And for those who weren't able to, give us your feedback on kind of what format will work best for you. And we are happy to adjust and adapt.
Thank you. Thanks, as
Yeah,
always, thanks for including um us in it. I really appreciate it. And all for those who weren't able to join us, you will get the video tomorrow. So thank you so much.
perfect. Thank you so much, Leslie. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for joining us, Pat.